You're going to make a decision this week, maybe even today, that you're completely confident is the right one. One where the numbers add up, the logic holds, and everyone in the room nods and moves on. But in 5 years' time, you look back and wonder how you got that one decision wrong. As a leader, that's on you. Because leaders who can't see around corners don't stay in the room for long. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 decisions that feel completely rational right now, and what they could look like from 5 years out. I'm going to show you the one reason we keep making bad decisions, and I'm going to give you one question that fixes it. The first decision happens every time someone leaves or when you are growing. Either way, you need to hire. So you do what any sensible leader does. You write a job description based on what the role has required up to now. You interview for skills that are proven and familiar. You hire the person who best fits the world as it currently exists. And that makes complete sense. You have a problem, you solve it, you move on. But here's the question that almost never gets asked in that process. What will this role actually require in 3 to 5 years? Because here's what's true and slightly uncomfortable. The skills that make someone exceptional today may be largely irrelevant tomorrow. Because the tools change, the context shifts, the problems evolve. And the person you hired to be brilliant at the current business model may be exactly the wrong person to help you navigate what comes next. Leaders who hire with foresight are doing something subtly different. They're not just filling a gap, they're thinking ahead, asking, do I need someone who executes brilliantly right now, or someone who can grow into the role this job will become in 5 years? Those are sometimes the same person, but often they're not. And if you never ask the question, you will always default to the first. And hiring isn't the only place this happens. The next decision is one that almost never gets treated as a decision at all. Every few years, your organization renews its office lease. A facilities manager benchmarks square footage per head, brokers present a few options, leadership picks based on location and cost. Done in a week, filed away for 5 years. Nobody called a strategy meeting. Nobody ran scenarios. Nobody asked what the world might look like in year 4 of this commitment. Because it didn't feel like a strategic decision. It felt like admin. But think about what actually just happened. You just made a 5-year assumption on how your team will work, on where your talent will want to be, on what office even means in your industry. You made it in a week, based entirely on how things look like right now, with zero examination of whether those things might look different by the time the lease expires. And the consequences are very real. The companies that signed confidently in 2019 before the pandemic, locking in years of premium city center space, spent the next 4 years carrying leases that no longer matched how their people wanted to work, hemorrhaging money on empty floors, watching competitors move faster because they weren't anchored to a building. The lease didn't cause the problem. The unexamined assumptions baked into the lease did. Now, both of those decisions, the hire and the lease, at least feel bounded. Someone owns them. They have a beginning and an end. What comes next is more insidious because it doesn't announce itself as a decision either. It just looks like good management. Your best product is performing well, so you invest more. Your strongest market is growing, so you go deeper. Your most successful process is delivering results, so you scale it. This is just good management. This is what you're supposed to do. And it is, up to a point, because every strength has a shelf life. And the more successful something becomes, the harder it gets to see the end of that shelf life approaching. Because success gives you every reason to continue doing what's working, and no reason to think whether this will still be working 3 years from now. You know the Kodak story. In 1975, Steve Sasson, a Kodak engineer, built the world's first digital camera. It captured images and played them back on a television screen. Kodak had seen the future. They'd even built it themselves, nearly 4 decades before they went bankrupt. But here's what makes this more than a cautionary tale about missing a trend. Kodak's business model ran on film. Film was where the margins lived, and digital in those early years was genuinely inferior. Grainy, expensive, complicated. Management looked at it and didn't see a threat. That's not stupidity, that's rational, at least at that particular moment. What they couldn't see, what their success with film made invisible, and something that Kevin, one of my viewers, pointed out, the mainstream customers were not necessarily interested in quality. They were interested in not having to go to the film shop to get their film developed, in being able to share a picture the moment it was taken. Kodak invented the technology that made all of that possible. They just never asked what it would do to their business model. They missed transitioning from film to digital. Because when film is making you money, nobody asks what comes after film. If the business case is solid, why think about what could go wrong? There is no crisis to respond to, just a very successful company doing exactly what successful companies do, doubling down on what works. Until it doesn't. And by 2012, when they went bankrupt, it didn't. So here's the question that a future-ready leader adds to every conversation in which the numbers are pointing to success and the decision feels obvious. Under what conditions would this successful model stop working? And how do we monitor for early signs that the environment is changing? These questions don't stop you investing in what's working. They just make sure you're not completely blind to the moment when working quietly becomes was working. And that moment always arrives quieter than you expect. Now here's what I want you to see, because the lease and the hire are just the most visible example of something much bigger. Choosing a supplier feels like procurement, but underneath that decision you're embedding assumptions about geopolitical stability, trade policy, climate resilience, assumptions that could take years to unravel if they turn out to be wrong. Writing a return to office policy feels like HR, but you're actually staking a position on what employees will accept and what your competitors will offer in a labor market that is actively being renegotiated right now. None of these feel like strategic decisions in the moment, but all of them are. They arrive dressed as paperwork, get handed to the relevant function, get optimized for the obvious variables, and the assumptions inside them go completely unexamined. And here's what's interesting. All three of these decisions, the hire, the lease, and the investment, have the same root cause, which means they have the same fix. Nobody decides to get these decisions wrong. Nobody sits in a room and consciously chooses to hire backwards, or to stop questioning what's working, or to sign a commitment full of assumptions they've never tested. It happens because something else is always more urgent. Think about your own calendar this week. The meeting that's already in the diary beats the thinking time that isn't. The crisis in front of you beats the horizon you should be watching. The email that arrived this morning beats the strategic question that's been sitting unanswered for 3 months. This is how strategic blindness becomes the default. Not dramatically, not with a single catastrophic decision, just quietly. Gradually, meeting by meeting, quarter by quarter, a slow accumulation of completely reasonable short-term choices that add up, over time, to a long-term blind spot. And the really dangerous part, it always feels like you're being responsible. You're dealing with what's real. You're managing what's actually in front of you. Except the future is also real. It just doesn't send urgent calendar invites. So here's the fix. And it's simpler than you think. One question, before any decision whose consequences extend beyond 12 to 18 months. Any hire, any investment, any commitment, any policy. Ask this. What am I assuming about the future here? And is there already evidence that those assumptions are under pressure? That's it. That question asked consistently is what catches the hire that optimizes for now. The strength that's about to become a blind spot. The decision dressed as paperwork that's actually a 5-year strategic bet. It doesn't replace your judgment. It ensures you're not making decisions about the future with your eyes fixed entirely on the present. But here's what I've learned from working with leaders on this. Knowing it isn't enough, because the gap between seeing this clearly and actually leading differently, that gap is where most people stay. Not because they lack the intention, because the urgency never stops, because the calendar never clears, because good intentions without a concrete sequence to follow always lose to whatever is loudest this week. That's exactly what the next video is. A specific 90-day roadmap, Week 1, month 1, quarter 1. Each step building on the last. I'll show you precisely what to do, when to do it, and why the order matters. So you can go from reactive to proactive without needing a budget, a mandate, or anyone else's permission. If that's where you want to go, watch this next.